It was back in September that the Amistad Project sounded the alarm over the $250 million being funneled to the local election offices and races from a foundation funded by Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Now, on its face, this arrangement raises a lot of questions and potential conflicts, but few in power took it really seriously. Well, maybe they should have, because at least $6.3 million of it went to Fulton County, Georgia, which is ground zero for voter fraud concerns in that state. Now, last week, Amistad Project Director Phil Klein warned us that we could see more of the same in the Georgia runoffs.
They're doing the same thing. The Zuckerberg money is pouring in. They're eviscerating the chain of custody of the ballots. They're doing the same thing under COVID fear with private money, and it's going to make this election just as confusing and with evident fraud as the previous election. It shouldn't happen.
Joining me now is Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Lindsey Graham. Senator, we have big tech plutocrats. I mean, you make the argument meddling in our elections by dumping huge amounts of money, $250 million. But is any of it illegal, and what can be done about it?
Well, it's not illegal, but I think we need to stop it, because you've got a liberal man spending millions of dollars to help election officials at the state level run an election. We need to stop that. Can you imagine if some conservative did this and there was a screwed up election where a Democrat came out on the short end? They'd be all over this. So the bottom line here is Fulton County is a disaster. And the point you made is the most important point. If we don't change Georgia law before the Senate runoffs in January the 5th, the same thing's going to happen to the senators that happened to President Trump. It's insane for Georgia Republican leaders not to have a special session to fix this before it's too late.
Do you think, and this is what a lot of people are wondering, given this huge influx of cash into Georgia, that people are on the take here in one way or another, with a promise of, we did an angle on how all these big Wall Street types are getting now sweetheart deals with new IPOs and other investment sweetheart deals in China. What's going on here with Zuckerberg and the Democrats? Are people just lying down, thinking, well, I'll get ultimately rewarded in the future?
I just don't think private groups should be able to fund public elections. There's no good outcome here. He may be civic-minded, he may have a good purpose, but it just doesn't pass the smell test. Look at what happened in Fulton County. If you had an audit of the signatures in the presidential election, you would find, I believe, massive problems. And the reason we don't have an audit of signatures is not because of any Democrat, it's because we have Republicans in Georgia that refuse to allow President Trump to look at the ballots in a bipartisan way, the signatures on the envelopes, and see if they're actually genuine. Until you do that, I don't really accept the outcome of the Georgia election as being accurate until you have an audit of the signatures.
And congressional hearings, people think they're a waste of time sometimes, but don't you have the power as Senate Judiciary Committee Chair to conduct hearings on all of this, on the China issue?
Sure.
What happened with Swalwell, then happened with Feinstein, and for a 20-year period, and now this. Asking Mr. Zuckerberg exactly what are your intentions, and why do we have Chinese spies working for U.S. elected officials?
Well, you can't really make this up, Laura. You've got the #1 persecutor of Donald Trump, alleging he and his campaign and his family were tied to Russia, who in fact had his office infiltrated by a Chinese intern that came from a recommendation of a Chinese spy. Does he have the good judgment to be on intel? So at the end of the day, if a Republican were in his shoes, can you imagine what they'd be saying if Kevin McCarthy found himself in this situation? So yeah, I think this is really, after this election's over, I want to do a deep dive in the 2020 election about mail-in voting. If you can't verify the signatures, it's ripe for fraud. If you go vote in person, you got to present an ID to prove you are who you say you are. To a bipartisan group. In Georgia, you got a single person verifying signatures that is ripe for fraud. This consent decree that Stacey Abrams conned the Georgia Republican leadership into signing is a disaster for signature verification. So if we don't change this thing now, I'm very worried about the outcome of the Senate races.
Senator, great to see you tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.